Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. In today's psychology lecture, I'll be talking about human memory. And what I want to do first is establish the historical context. So I'll outline various ideas about human memory and how they've changed over time. So first, early cultures. Now, in the earliest times, let's say before 3,000 years BC, people were dependent on being able to remember things, perhaps even more than we are today. That's because humans could not write. The skill hadn't been developed. So a good memory was important. For one thing, it helped people navigate in the area around their homes, and it was the only way to access family history and ancestry. What's more, a good memory might be the difference between life and death. Most people were hunters and gatherers, so it was essential to understand which foods were poisonous and which were not. This was particularly true of plants because they sometimes looked very similar, and the only way to store this information and pass it on to the next generation was to remember it. Unfortunately, because it was so long ago, there's limited information about what techniques were used to assist memory. Okay, so moving on now to the ancient Greeks. And the Greek poet named Simonides, who lived around 500 BC, was the man sometimes described as the father of memory training. Simonides' most important idea was that it's much easier to remember information if we connect it with one particular place. Then, over hundreds of years, other Greek scholars developed his ideas about memory, and a lot of this information has survived. So, we know that, by the 1st century, the Greeks believed that people could use their human senses to improve their memory, and this was particularly true when it came to sight. There was a strong connection there, they believed. Well, next I should talk about the ancient Romans, who, like the Greeks, believed memory training was extremely important. They used memory in many different ways, obviously, but most of all, in ancient Rome, people thought that one of the greatest skills was the ability to give an impressive speech in public, and memory was one of the keys to doing that. So this was why, from about 100 BC, the Romans wanted to develop techniques to improve memory. And an important figure here was Cicero, a Roman political leader. One of Cicero's ideas was that humans actually have two types of memory. There's a memory that can be developed, which he called the artificial memory, and there's another type of memory which he called natural. And the point is that you can learn techniques to help improve your artificial memory, an idea that's interested some academics ever since. So, moving next to later European history, and the first thing to note is that during the Middle Ages, a group of academics called the Scholastics were also interested in memory techniques. The Scholastics used these techniques when they were instructing pupils about religion, and this raised the profile of memory techniques. But later, attitudes towards memory began to change, and this started in the 17th century. People began to see memory training as an art form, and that didn't interest them so much anymore because they thought that science had the answers to most human questions. This attitude really continued into the 19th century as well. Children weren't taught memory techniques, but were expected to learn lots of facts, and to do this by constantly repeating things like dates and so on. Okay, so then we come to modern times, and in the 1940s, a remarkable series of studies was conducted with a man known simply as S. Psychologists found that S never made notes about anything, although he was a journalist and never forgot facts. The researchers concluded that S had an unusual medical condition, which meant he'd developed incredible memory skills. This was important as it seemed to support the ideas of the ancient Greeks and other much earlier scholars. But in the later part of the 20th century, the focus switched to computers. Okay, well, that's the historical context. Let's now turn to